Hello, everybody. Just waiting for some people to join and we'll get started. I'm here with Craig from Crowd Machine, as well as Graham from Polymath. Good morning.
Hey, guys.
Good evening. Let's see. What's up, everybody? Just waiting for the room to get a little more populated and then we'll get started. All right, so welcome everybody to another AMA with myself, Jake, aka Korean Jew Trading. I'm really excited and proud to be able to talk with Graham and of Polymath and Craig of Crowd Machine. These are two very interesting projects. As always, do your own research. We're going to try to I like to ask questions that I think are very relevant to people in the crypto space, kind of like the questions that you want to know before potentially investing in a project. But always do your own research. This is not financial advice, and this is a sponsored video. So I'm going to try to give you as much information as possible. We also have the chat open, so I know there will be questions. Try to hold them towards the end because it's very difficult for me to pay attention to the chat as well as conduct a good interview. But in the end, we will try to definitely open it up for some questions from the crowd, per se. So, gentlemen, how are we doing today? How are you?
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having us on. We're great here.
Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, all right. It's my pleasure. Let's get right into it. So one of the first things I like to ask is, and we could start with Polymath. When I think of Poly, it's a project that I've been keeping up with for some time, and it's Polymath equals security tokens, which right now is a very hot concept in crypto. People believe that security tokens are the wave of the future. So in a few short sentences, without going all the way, I mean, how would you describe Polymath's vision? What is the project and what are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah, Polymath is the securities token platform. So we are making it very easy for pretty much anyone to raise capital and issue their own security. So the difference between the securities we're helping these people issue or these companies issue relative to the old world is that these securities are tokens that exist on a blockchain. So there's a lot of problems when you get into the world of paper share certificates, which is what the majority of shares that exist today are. I mean, they're literal pieces of paper that have then been poorly, in our opinion, digitized, and then they're able to trade on exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. But there are actually a lot of shares and equities and bonds and derivatives and all of these things in the world that exist as literal pieces of paper. And so these are very illiquid. They're really hard to trade. It costs a lot of money in order to trade them. And there's restrictions on trading, like for example, at least in Canada where I am right now, you can only trade stocks between 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. Right. That makes absolutely no sense. And so in the world that Polymath envisions, where all of these financial securities like stocks, bonds, shares in venture capital funds, real estate, illiquid assets like artwork, all these other things, once they become tokenized and essentially their ownership is backed by these tokens, which represent a real ownership stake, the world of capital markets is going to become much more frictionless. So it's going to be way easier to trade all of these instruments. Trading fees will essentially go to zero over time, and the whole entire capital markets will function much better and much more smoothly for everybody involved. So that's kind of the ultimate vision we see, is all of these assets becoming tokenized. And so there are these tokens that represent actual ownership in all assets on Earth eventually, is kind of what we see as as occurring. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to push forward. And we're doing that by making it easy for companies to raise capital and issue these securities.
Very interesting stuff. Now, I mean, because I speak for the people kind of in the trenches that are trading crypto, let's face it, novice or amateur traders that perhaps have never traded another market. This is kind of like an awakening, a revolution of people like myself that just kind of got into this and really live and breathe crypto trading all the time. Now, when you think of like securities, you think SEC, regulation, licensing, red tape, that kind of closes investors like myself and many of my following off. I mean, and I know that, I can't take this answer to the bank, but if you had to guess, do you think security tokenization is going to be huge in the future? And do you think that somebody like myself or my following would be able to still participate in that?
It is going to be absolutely massive. The amount of securities tokens that are going to exist in terms of market cap will dwarf the utility token market cap by several orders of magnitude. So right now there's, let's call it $500 billion worth of utility tokens, if you're including essentially every cryptocurrency that exists. I mean, if you take one large hedge fund, that's $500 billion. So if you tokenize one large hedge fund and you take all of their shares and you essentially remove them from being pieces of paper and you put them as tokens, that's now the size of the utility token market cap. One hedge fund, one very large hedge fund. So if you do that 100 times over, then that's game over, essentially. If you take some real estate from, I'm sitting in Toronto right now, if you take some real estate sitting in Toronto, you already dwarf the utility token market cap after the first couple buildings. So the amount of financial securities that exist in the world and that will exist in the world once we call it tokenize everything, that completely dwarfs the amount of market cap in terms of the size of utility tokens. And so your other question, will regular people be able to participate? Yes. So there are still going to be a large number of offerings of securities that are only available to, quote, accredited investors, or you're in some jurisdictions, wholesale investors, it's called. So these are people that have met certain requirements that allow them to participate in certain offering types. But there's been a lot of strides recently in the last couple of years with things like the Jobs Act and the crowdfunding exemptions, where non-accredited people can invest in private companies. And so we see that trend likely continuing. I mean, I'm not a regulator, I'm not a securities lawyer, but I think regulators are starting to realize, okay, it doesn't make that much sense to cut out all retail investors from all offerings, and provided that people kind of still know what they're getting into, and there are certain disclosures that are required and certain regulations that a company who's offering these securities to a public or retail investor has to do, then regulators are allowing these regular Joes, as you might call it, into these kinds of offerings of private companies. So I think retail investors and your sort of regular everyday person is not going to be able to participate in every single offering and every single security token, but they will be able to participate in some, and we see that as a huge win.
Very good. That sounds exciting. So Craig, let's move on to Crowd Machine.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the vision, what you guys are trying to accomplish, what problems you're trying to solve, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so Crowd Machine is really focused on democratizing application creation. To date, we have a history as software engineers, and creating apps is always slow and tedious and difficult to do for most people. So we've spent our time creating a technology that allows anybody to model their solution. It's in a decentralized structure. So that's one aspect of it. It's the app creation piece. The second piece that we're working on is what we refer to as a crowd computer. The first phase of that will be out in beta soon. And you can think of that as being much like a decentralized AWS. It is actually a compute paradigm that the applications exist on in a truly decentralized manner. And the third piece that's a part of it is creating what we refer to as crowd share. It's essentially, think of it as being like GitHub, where people can upload content that they may have created. So, I often use the example of if I'm a meteorologist and I know weather modeling very well, then I could create a weather modeling sort of engine, if you like, in our technology, put it into CrowdShare, and then you might have another application developer somewhere on the planet who's building an agricultural system, for argument's sake. They need weather modeling. They can just include that weather modeling into their application, utilize it in whatever way they want to utilize it, and then every time that piece of technology gets executed inside their application, the original creator is rewarded for it. So that's one of the incentive models that we're using to drive participation in the actual product. So we're all about getting applications to market super fast, and we have examples of people on the lower side. It's probably 10 times faster than the traditional approach, and we've got actual stats right up to 45 times faster to get an app to market. And these people aren't developers in the traditional sense. They're people who understand the problem they're trying to solve and can actually use the product to model the solution. So that's what we're up to.
All right. So when I was checking out the white paper and your website, looking into the project, I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, I'm really a layperson when it comes to that. So what I got out of the project that was exciting to me was somebody that has an idea for a decentralized application that doesn't have coding knowledge can create it through Crowd Machine. Now, I'm somebody I've always had these ideas. Like I was gonna make, the next Twitter or whatever Periscope or the next hot app, and I would come up with these ideas, and then I'd have to find development, typically in India or whatnot, and I just realized at one point after all these, Ralph Cramden type schemes that the only way I could ever make this happen is if I actually develop it myself. And unfortunately, that's not really my forte and something that I never learned. So for someone that has a creative mind that wants to create an app, do you think with your platform that will be possible?
Sure, and that's what's happening today. So the whole idea here is to move the need to understand code, writing code, debugging code, deploying applications, all of those types of things that you do when you're building an app, is to remove those barriers of knowledge, if you like, and allow you to focus on the problem you're trying to solve. So if you've got an idea, you can jump into the product and actually model that idea out using the Crowd App Studio, and then basically you deploy it from our dev mode to staging for test, and then from test to production, and you're done. So it allows people like you, Jake, who don't have a coding background but might have great ideas, to actually model those ideas out and create an application in the function of doing it. All right, so when we talk about democratizing application development, that's what we're referring to. In the course of my career, you bump into people all the time who have great ideas but haven't the background in coding to actually execute those ideas. And for every developer in the world, there's probably 10 people who are capable of creating applications but just don't have those skills. So it opens up a much larger demographic of participants and enables them to actually create apps, even though they don't write code.
Yeah, because for me, when you're the creator and it's your baby, it's your idea, and you're able to, nobody's going to have the passion that you have for it, even if you're paying them. And that's the exciting part. But also the democratization component to it, where it's kind of like Fiverr or something, where you have a larger selection. Speaking of which, and I just thought of this, developers building, is there a reputation component that can track how good the quality of their work is?
Sure. So what we have, we're releasing shortly, it's being worked on right now, is what we refer to as the Crowd Academy. It's a 7-level of accreditation process, with level 7 being the highest. So your reputation will be based upon what level of accreditation you actually achieve. And this isn't something where you just jump in and in 2 days you're finished and certified. This is actually a process that you work through. There are examinations and various other tutorials and things that you are mandatorily required to complete to achieve that accreditation. So the levels will dictate the competency of the individual and the knowledge they have in using the technology to build apps. So if you wanted to build an application and there were some really hard parts of that application, then you might pass it out to some level 6 or level 7 people in the community. Or if there are some easier parts, you might pass that out to level 1, level 2, level 3, depending what it is. So you can mix and match if you choose to do that. And we expect to see over the course of time that the compensation that each of those people that are working on your application receive will be predicated upon the level of accreditation that they have achieved, right? So somebody at a level 7 will probably be able to command a greater hourly rate perhaps than somebody at a level 2. So there is that certification process.
All right, so we'll talk more about each individual project in a second, but before we move forward, obviously you guys are on this together because Polymath and Crowd Machine have joined in partnership. Can tell me how did that come about, and why? You know, like what do these two projects have in relationship with each other? How do you plan to work together?
Graham, you want to take that?
I'll talk about it for a little bit, at least from the Polymath side, and then Craig can I'm sure provide a lot more color than me. So I mean, at the end of the day, Polymath and Crowd Machine are both very, very focused on making this blockchain space easy to navigate for non-developers. So Polymath is trying to make it easy for somebody who runs a business and has an idea and says, hey, you know what, I want to go raise $10 million for this great new idea I have. Where do I go? Well, I go to Polymath. Because previously, if you want to go raise capital, you generally will go talk to Goldman Sachs, or you go talk to Morgan Stanley, or you go talk to some investment banker, broker dealer like that. And then you do all those kinds of things. And then maybe you've heard about the blockchain space and you went, oh, hey, I can issue one of these cool tokens. Maybe I'll raise capital that way. And so you go ahead and you go do that. And then you go, oh my God, I need a smart contract developer. What is a smart contract? I don't know what these are. So if you just come to Polymath, Polymath makes it very, very easy for you to take advantage of all of the benefits of blockchain technology while making it easy to raise capital for your business, for whatever you're looking to do. And so with that, we want non-developers to be able to use the platform. And so Crowd Machine is squarely focused on making sure that non-developers are able to develop their own code. And so kind of how we see the partnership playing out is essentially person A who's looking to raise capital comes to Polymath, and then they can select some smart contracts that have already been built for their offering that they're going to make, because you have all of these contracts that you need in order to execute. So when an investor sends you money, you can effectively and properly send them back the exact amount of tokens they want, and that everything works smoothly. And so Crowd Machine is going to be able to allow businesses to actually build those smart contracts themselves. And so that will be very, very empowering in terms of somebody who's looking to raise capital. I'm sure Craig can talk a little bit more about kind of how they see this playing out in the future as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Graham's right. You know, we're trying to assist everybody in terms of building their apps, as you pointed out before, Jake. You might have an idea, you want to take it to market, you're going to need to raise capital, you need to build that application, you need to run your sale and all those sorts of things as a function of raising the capital. There are a number of challenges in the whole process. You know, Graham and I know it firsthand, we've been through it, right, lived it. And it's a tough slog to pull all of that together. And one of the most difficult aspects of taking a product to market, of course, is creating the product itself. As you pointed out before, building an app. If you're not a coder, you might be required to go and outsource that project to somebody, find developers. It's expensive. Typically, those projects are late in delivery. They cost you more than you expected. There's a lot of frustration back and forth. That's sort of the typical process. So we're trying, in conjunction with Polymath, to take the friction out of the entire process, right? Automate all of those functions that are difficult to do, so that it allows people to participate who couldn't have otherwise participated. So that's really what we're focused on here. At Crowd Machine, the other thing that we're working on as well, and Graham just touched on it, is the requirement of creating a smart contract is very complex. It's fraught with all sorts of issues if you get it wrong, and we've seen that in the market in the past with the DAO and things like that. So what we're doing at Crowd Machine is removing the need to actually create a smart contract, period, right? The platform itself has a smart contract built into it that you apply to your particular project, and then you just build your application using the Crowd Machine technology, and it knows the calls it needs to make back in the smart contract to perform the tasks that it needs to perform for your application and or sale process. So a lot of automation and a lot of focus in conjunction with Polymath to make that entire process of walking through a security token listing and those types of things an automated process and easy for people to do.
I see. So somebody in the chat actually has an interesting question. Alvin's background is he writes a little Solidity, and he says creating a token is easy. How does this make it easier? What is the typical cost of a project when looking for a Solidity developer?
Well, it depends. They can be very, very expensive. You're paying $500 an hour, something like that, for a Solidity developer. So it's actually an expensive process. And when we went through our token sale, we actually were pretty busy at the time, and I had somebody create the contract for us. And you go through a process of creating the contract, you put it out for audit to make sure there are no bugs in it and all those sorts of things. And we created a very simple contract, and we submitted it for audit, and there was the auditors found one bug in it. And then when it came back, we had a further look at it ourselves, and we found a bug in the contract that the auditors had actually missed. And these are industry known guys. So the issue with smart contracts is that they're risky, and finding Solidity developers that really know their game is pretty hard because they're few and far between, and they're also very, very expensive. All right. So I don't know whether I answered the question, but that would be my response.
Yeah, I would add that creating a coin is easy, but conducting and creating all the contracts for a sale is not. I would say that's a very complex process, and if you mess it up, like, that's a huge amount of money that can be on the line that you essentially have completely messed up. And so that is a very dangerous area where it takes a lot of care and something that costs a lot of money to hire a Solidity developer, to hire all of these people to do these things, and then not to mention the cost that it takes to have code audited. That's also very high. And then when you get into the world of securities tokens, there are a whole host of other things that you need to make sure that you program into your smart contracts. Because if you code them incorrectly, or you make a mistake, or there's some bug that allows somebody to create shares out of thin air, you might now be on the hook for securities fraud. And so that is not a good place to be when you're a company. So if over time we can develop all of these templates of smart contracts that have been used, that have been audited, that have been vetted over and over again, hundreds and then thousands of times, then that is a world that makes a lot more sense in terms of creating these tokens, and specifically these securities tokens. So you don't have to rely on just some developer you hired saying, hey, I wrote this contract for you, it's all good. You actually now will have the ability to see, okay, these 100 companies used this essentially identical contract in the past, and it worked every single time. Now you feel much more confident in using that. And I think that's actually going to lead to a big amount of adoption for securities tokens, is having people go through this process many, many times, having it work every single time. And at the end of the day, having regulators give essentially the check mark saying, yeah, okay, this stuff works and we trust it. Very good.
So you can see from the conversation, Jake, we're we're moving toward a paradigm where the process of actually writing a smart contract sort of dissipates. The smart contract still exists, but we're removing the need for the actual person who's trying to build the application to create that smart contract, right? It becomes a transparent layer that they don't even need to be aware of. So that's where it's headed.
And I believe that's the future of, blockchain adoption as well. Where people will be using it and not even necessarily realizing they are. So it's kind of
that's
like,
right.
Yeah. So another good question, and I have others, but I don't want to forget, and people are asking in the chat, and I think this is relevant. So for Craig, is there a plan to incentivize people to get this the Crowd Machine community going? The hardest part of building a community is starting it. Crowd Machine will only see a success once you get people using it. So he's kind of alluding to the old adage, don't take the if we build it, they will come approach.
Yep.
What are you doing to get users onto Crowd Machine? And also, I know that beta has just recently been open. So the second part of that question is, how is that going?
Okay, so let me touch on the beta first. We ran a beta for a period of time. This technology isn't, it's not something we created in the last 12 months. It's been tested for quite some time and being run by enterprises today. The beta was really about opening it up to the public. We had a lot of participants in the beta. It went very well. There was some very consistent feedback, which was great that we're acting on. So the beta has now completed. The product is open for people to go and start using today. If they go to the Crowd Machine website, they can actually go and register and start using the App Studio right now. So that was sort of the beta side of the question. The incentive model, there's two things about it, right? You don't really want to go and learn a new technology if at the end of the day there isn't a market the other side of it for you, or you're going to use that technology to do your own thing, right? So we're sort of focused on two things there. One is with the accreditation levels, what we're doing is we're incenting people to achieve by rewarding tokens against actual levels. So they'll have tokens that achieve for level 1, tokens that they can achieve for level 2, additional bonus tokens if they do additional tutorials through the Crowd Academy process. So that accreditation process I was speaking about before is incented with tokens. So you're rewarded with tokens, which you can then use as gas to go and run your apps, right? That's how the model works. On the other side of it is that we are actively beginning a process of growing both obviously the community, but also the opportunity out the other side of it. So you may have noticed yesterday there was an announcement where we've engaged Meg Jones. Meg comes from the UN. She is highly networked around the world with nation states at various levels. And then the intent is to go and actually talk to these various nations and get them focused on educating their people on the technology and creating markets in those jurisdictions for those people to gain work once they understand the technology. So building applications for their local government or school districts or whatever it might be. So we're creating a market for people to actually engage in once they've gone through the accreditation process. Right.
Very interesting.
And we reward them with tokens on the way.
Okay. Speaking of tokens, what's the status of CM's ICO? I know originally it was kind of like an EOS extended ICO token raise. Can you give us an update on what's going on and where it stands from there?
Okay, so we raised a reasonable amount of capital when we ran our ICO. We have enough capital to hit our initial milestones, and they are things like getting the crowd computer rolled out. So we held the sale simply because we've got enough capital for the moment. We want to hit some milestones, and then we will look to re-engage the market post achieving that as objectives if we need to. But I will say that the Crowd Machine technology utilizes the tokens to run apps, right? So there has to be a sufficient supply of tokens generally available for people to use for gas to run their applications. It'll be like trying to use Ethereum without having gas at your disposal, right? it's not the model, or the model doesn't work if it's not available. So we need to make sure that there are sufficient tokens actually in the market to power these applications, because we are in fact a utility token in that sense, right?
And
so,
sorry.
So I was just going to say, so whether we continue to run the public sale at this stage or not is up for debate. We'll see where we end up.
Okay, and speaking of investors, Charlie Shrem, very early Bitcoin adopter, a pretty famous guy in the space, has gone on record saying that he did make a very sizable, I think this was his largest investment. So he's very bullish behind the Crowd Machine. Now, do you guys have any interaction with him, or was that just kind of like on his own? He saw the project and really liked it.
Charlie is very, very engaged in the project. He is very bullish about the project, and we interact with Charlie on a weekly basis.
I like that.
So he's part of the family. We love having him around, and he's bullish about it because he understands that the success or otherwise of cryptocurrency and blockchain and those types of things are dependent on the number of applications that exist that consume it. Blockchain technology is a utility at the end of the day. It doesn't have a lot of application in the absence of apps that utilize it, right? So the pace of adoption of blockchain and the pace of adoption of crypto across the board is dependent upon the pace of application delivery. So Charlie sees us as being, the answer to getting these apps built to accelerate the adoption of these technologies, which drives an industry, the blockchain industry. So that's why he's bullish.
Awesome. So Graham, switching back over to Polymath. Polymath is it's trending right now. It's very hot. How much demand are you currently seeing in projects wanting to build decentralized apps with security tokens?
Yeah, the amount of potential issuers, so we call anybody who's looking to issue a security token, we call them issuers. And so the amount of issuers we have right now that are excited about issuing their own security token using the Polymath standard, which is ST20, and the Polymath platform is in the tens of thousands.
Really?
So, I mean, it is absolutely insane in terms of the demand. And so
wow.
Initially, a long time ago, back in the day of 2017, a long time ago in blockchain world, we were kind of thinking, okay, cool, yeah, we'll build a company and we'll kind of consult with companies and make sure that it's easier for them to raise capital and issue these tokens, and we'll just kind of function like a consulting business. And when we realized how much demand we had for companies wanting to do this, it was just like, okay, we have absolutely no way in hell of having enough throughput that we can actually deal with all of the companies that are looking to do this. And so we figured we should actually just make a platform that makes it easy and for companies to do this in a self-serve way. So they don't actually need Polymath's help specifically in order to do this. They just use the platform where they're introduced to people who already provide these services. So for example, when you're an issuer, you come to the platform, and one of the first questions is, do you have an advisory firm you're working with to help you raise capital or to help you with issues of corporate finance? No? Okay, well, here are a few that we recommend. And so you contact one of those companies, and then you kind of start working with them. Do you have a smart contract developer? Do you have your own? If you don't, here are some that we recommend. Do you have a legal team who's going to help you with your raise in terms of recommending where you should do your offering, what types of investors you should allow in, should you use an exemption, things like that? No, if you don't have a legal team, here are some that we recommend. So we realized if we make a platform, then what we're going to do is enable these tens of thousands of companies and people that are looking to issue securities tokens to actually get them completed. And so, I mean, if you see any of our email inboxes at the office in terms of the amount of people who say, hey, I have this cool idea, I want to issue a security token, like your mind would explode. The amount of demand is very, very large. And we're just really happy for when we start seeing these tokens actually launch. So Polymath right now is live on Ethereum testnet. And our goal at the company right now is to essentially have the dApp go live on Ethereum mainnet about a month from now. And so when that happens, hopefully, I guess all hell breaks loose, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And just the amount of tokens that are getting created through the platform is very, very high. And we have a lot of successful companies that are able to issue their investors better forms of ownership. So actual tokens that exist on the blockchain that are much easier to deal with than a piece of paper that represents a share. So we're just really excited for that to happen, and we're thrilled with the amount of demand that we've received.
Wow. So with all that demand, I mean, it seems like this is a good opportunity for Crowd Machine. And, you know, you say my head would explode if I saw those emails. I'd like to show you my inbox, because I think I have the same amount of messages saying, when Bitcoin moon? And
yeah.
when am I not wrecked? You know, so we could share that, and your head will explode as well.
Yeah.
But
we can trade war stories.
Yeah. So, like, I guess when I think about Polymath, there's a lot to like, but I'd like to hear from your perspective. What's your biggest challenge? Like, what's the hardest thing about actually executing your model and your vision right now?
Biggest challenge is just getting it out the door. So I joined Polymath in September of last year. I was the 5th person on the team. We're now a team of 30, approaching 40 very soon in the next couple of weeks with some new hires. And I mean, so I joined in September, and I went, cool, man, securities tokens next month, let's go. And it's taken a while. So the amount of stuff that it requires to actually build something using blockchain technology that is beautiful, that people want to use, that's also easy to understand, it's a very, very hard process. So I mean, in my opinion, we have the best designers, one of the best product managers in the world that are now working on the Polymath platform. And so I mean, I'm just really, really excited to see it go live, because it's been now 7 or 8 months where I've been going, okay, man, come on, we need securities tokens today. Right now, we need securities tokens. And so, I mean, while that has been, I guess, the biggest challenge in terms of just actually getting the product out the door, it is very, very close. So you can actually go right now and create your own security token that exists on Ethereum testnet right now, today. So if you go to polymath.network and then you click the button that says create security token, you can go create your very own security token right now. And if anybody who's watching this actually wants to go do that, you want to provide some feedback, you want to say, hey guys, this sucks, I didn't like step 2, or I didn't like this part of the DApp, like, we want to hear about that. Because when we go live on Ethereum mainnet in a month, maybe 2 months from now, like, we want it to be perfect. And so we're just really, really excited about this phase in, I guess, our life cycle, I would say.
So what do you think is the tipping point before major adoption?
I think people need to see a few securities tokens that work. I don't think in the next 5-6 months we're going to see Apple or Google issue a security token. I think very large public companies that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, I don't think we're going to see them issue a security token immediately. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see these companies that are trailblazers in the space and that are willing to try these new kinds of technology because
take a
they
risk.
see the possible. Yeah, because these people that are willing to see the types of benefits that a security token can provide over a paper share certificate, those companies are going to issue some securities tokens. These securities tokens are going to work. Fingers crossed, obviously, but we believe that they're going to work. Regulators are going to be happy with it. So the issuing companies are going to be happy, the investors are going to be happy, and regulators are going to be happy. And once that happens, let's say 10, 20, 50 times, I think that's when the snowball really picks up even more speed than it already was. I mean, because we're still seeing crazy demand, but it's from only kind of, I would say, the early adopters, trailblazers who are willing to take this risk. Risk in quotation marks. I don't see it as a huge risk based on the benefits that it can offer. But once that happens, I think that's when kind of the doors are going to get blown off.
Thanks, Graham. Shifting back to Crowd Machine, I know Polymath is launching on Ethereum network. Crowd Machine is agnostic. Can you let the people know, first off, what or it's network agnostic, I believe the term is, what that means, and how does Crowd Machine plan to scale with the interoperability needs of the future?
Yeah, there are two good questions. So I'll come back to the interoperability bit in a minute. But Crowd Machine, it allows you to embrace any blockchain network that you want. Obviously, the Ethereum network is supported, but you can make calls into any network that you want right now, pending how they actually interact. Over time, what we're doing is adding additional capability. For example, you're going to see us release shortly an automated integration into Neo, the same as what we already have with Ethereum, right? So we allow you to build applications that exist on our network that make calls into any blockchain that you want to make calls into. And as I was saying before, ultimately the goal here, and we've already started the process, is to completely make the fact that you're using a smart contract on that network transparent to the app creation process. You don't actually even understand that it's there. So we allow you today to build an app that you might be integrating into Ripple on one side and integrating into Ethereum on the other, utilizing smart contract to perform whatever it is that you need to do. The interoperability question is an interesting one from an industry standards perspective, and what we're not really seeing today is that standard evolving. My belief is that blockchains ultimately will verticalize. Not all of them, but many of them will, because not all of them can survive being a generic blockchain. There are too many already in the market. You've got Ethereum and Neo, and Infinity's rolling out. You've got EOS and a bunch of others. So the smaller guys are going to verticalize into particular areas. So there might be a verticalization. For example, if I was to use Polymath, you might see a verticalization of a security-based blockchain ultimately, right? You might see a verticalization of an authentication blockchain, or you might see a verticalization into a title management blockchain. So if you're a developer building applications and you need to use the authentication blockchain, the securities blockchain, and maybe a payment transaction or payment blockchain of some description, if you're tasked with understanding the different smart contract syntax, etc., across all of those blockchains, plus building your application, you are put at even greater risk of making a mistake because there are more technologies to understand. What really needs to happen is that those blockchains need to become sort of interoperable at a blockchain level. And hopefully with time we'll see that sort of standard evolve where these blockchains can intercommunicate. So I can potentially step off one transaction in a particular blockchain with a link into another transaction on a different blockchain that may be serving a different purpose. So that interoperability is going to be important going forward. Today what we're doing is allowing you to do that yourself inside the Crowd Machine environment by deploying against multiple blockchains and then managing those links inside your app. So that's sort of how we're getting around that particular limitation in the blockchain that exists in the blockchain industry today.
Very interesting.
Hopefully I haven't overcomplicated it, but...
well, I mean, it's a very well thought out answer, and obviously this is something that yourself and the team have looked into.
Right.
So I think that's a great answer. Another one for you, Craig. Have you ever heard of Holochain, and how do you plan to compete with them? Now, to be transparent, I don't know too much about Holochain, and I'm curious to see if you do.
Yeah, look, it's not a competitive situation really at all. We're aware of Holochain. Look, we are a sort of end-to-end application creation solution that leverages blockchain along the way. We also, we allow you to create applications that may not use a blockchain at all. Okay. And we integrate into pretty much everything there is to integrate into. So you can build apps in our world that are blockchain focused or not blockchain focused. And our real target here is democratization of the app creation process without ever needing to understand how to write a line of code. And that's a big statement, right? Because building very, very sophisticated applications is difficult to do. So when you start building a technology that allows those level of sophistication or that level of sophistication to be created without writing code, that's even that much harder again. So it's easy for people to say, hey, look, this is a competitor to Crowd Machine, but I can tell you, Crowd Machine didn't happen overnight, right? It's a vast piece of technology, and it really does allow you to build that application from end to end, regardless of the complexity, without actually ever writing a line of code. So we don't actually see anybody in the market today that is a direct competitor to what we offer. We don't see it.
That's a pretty strong response there. I mean, in a good way.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of ICOs that just, they're selling you a piece of paper and a dream, and they don't really have anything. So it's quite interesting. Another one that I just thought of, and I know that another component to Crowd Machine is the cloud, obviously. And you discuss running apps on your devices, similar to like a supercomputer type, like Golem or Sonum, something like that. What does that look like in Crowd Machine's ecosystem, and is that up and running? When will people be able to use their devices to generate Crowd Machine tokens?
Okay, so the first phase of that, it's called the crowd computer, right? And the way that our technology works is that any application that you may think of or you may use, they have behaviors. So, for example, an application that may be focused in the medical sector is another example I use. Let's say you've got some sort of hospital-based system. One of the functions of that system is to admit a person to hospital. Another function might be to reach out and check whether their insurance is current. Another function might be to discharge them from hospital, order blood gas analysis or something like that. So these applications have what we refer to as behaviors. And each of those things that I just described is a behavior that one of those applications exhibit. And within each of those behaviors, like admitting a patient to hospital, there are bodies of work that get undertaken or tasks that happen. For example, you might have a screen that a user needs to put some data into. You might have a call then to some sort of integration system to look up some data. So a pattern of behavior that makes up the admission is actually consists of a series of tasks. We refer to those tasks as activities, but in our supercomputer world, what happens is those tasks are distributed to devices. So instead of having centralized servers sitting at, say, AWS or something like that, what can happen is these applications exist as just a multitude of replicated fragments across this massive network. And what that allows us to do is actually utilize a mobile phone, for example, as a processor on the network, because you can give it a basic task to perform. And we take into consideration things like latency from the point of origin of a request to determine where it should route to and all those sorts of things. So that's the crowd computer. It's a full-blown supercomputer that runs real-time applications, not batch-based apps. We won't go there at the moment. The first phase of the computer will be rolling out to beta soon. So we have two nodes that exist in our network. The first one is the Agoric node, which is like think of it as a router that's routing these requests for app fragments around. But those things can also execute those application fragments themselves. And the second node on our network is what we call the ACN, the Activity Contributing Node, and that's your mobile device. So the first phase, the Agoric nodes are more server-oriented, and we're actually about to start rolling that out right now for beta. The second phase is the execution of activities on the mobile device, and that'll be later toward the end of the year when we roll that out. The intent is to try and have the computer, the crowd computer, in place in totality in beta by the end of the year.
Very good.
Yes, and people will be rewarded for utilizing their devices on the network, right? That's part of the token application.
That's very interesting. For Polymath, the question is, I assume that you are in contact with SEC, a lot of creation of security tokens. With this in mind, should we move forward with the belief that Polymath is not a security itself?
Yeah, so question about Poly, which is Polymath's inherent utility token that powers the platform. Yeah, Poly is not a security. Poly is, you could think of it like the gas that powers the platform and allows all of the participants on the platform to express value to one another and to interact with one another and to pay for services. So when an investor comes to the Polymath platform, in order to purchase securities tokens, because these things are financial securities, they have to go through a KYC process. So KYC, know your customer, for anybody that's unaware. When they pay the KYC provider on the Polymath platform, they pay them in Poly. Also when an issuing company comes to the platform, they will contract a KYC provider by paying them Poly. They will also contract a legal delegate. So this is a team or a securities lawyer who's going to work on that offering. The issuing company pays that lawyer in Poly. And then also companies can raise funds in Poly as well.
Interesting. Will Polymath and T0 overlap?
Interesting question. So we have a very, what I would call, friendly relationship with T0. So what's happening, and the way to think about the ecosystem is Polymath is the on-ramp for securities tokens. So company has the idea, I want to go raise some capital to start my new company, or I want to raise money to start this fund. Where do I go? I go to Polymath. And so Polymath does all the necessary things so that they can have that completed effectively and efficiently. And then they have their security token issued to them. But now, where do these securities tokens trade in the secondary market? Well, they trade at places like T0. So T0 is purely, as far as right now today, they will be a securities token exchange. So they are squarely focused on the trading in the secondary market for securities tokens. And so we're seeing actually a lot of other securities token exchanges come online right now as well. So one we're actually really excited about is one called Open Finance. And so Open Finance will be another place that can provide liquidity to Polymath powered projects. We don't know if T0 will eventually try to start issuing utility tokens. And there's another actually interesting point I'd like to touch on. With Polymath, we have recently announced that through a joint venture, we are soon, pending some final documents being signed and everything getting the okay, we will soon be the single largest shareholder of the Barbados Stock Exchange. So what we are very, very focused on is providing liquidity for these securities tokens. If we're over here creating these tens of thousands of securities and there's no way for them to have liquidity, then there's really no benefit over the traditional paper share certificate system, other than the fact that you can have control over your own securities, which today you cannot. You have to rely on a third party. So shout out to Bruce Fenton. Bruce Fenton loves the idea of having control over your own securities. So that is a huge benefit. But if there's no liquidity, I don't think the majority of people will care. So that's why we're really excited about platforms like T0, platforms like Open Finance, our stake in the Barbados Stock Exchange, which we're exploring exactly how to use that, where there are these regulated places that have all the necessary licenses in place to trade securities. They are the places that provide liquidity for Polymath-powered projects in the secondary market.
Very interesting. All right. We are going on a little over an hour, I believe. Any parting thoughts, comments that you guys would like to get across to the viewers before we jump off? And Craig will go with you first.
Yeah, sure. So, we're open for people to come along and try our technology. So, go to the website, jump in, register, go to the forum, ask questions, kick the tires, and give us any feedback that you might have. So, we'd like to see the community expanding significantly over the course of time, so we're inviting people to participate already. It's free to get started. Go and check it out.
Cool.
I would say the future is coming, and it will be glorious.
All right.
I love when the light bulb kind of goes off in people's head with realizing, okay, yeah, utility tokens are awesome, and they are cool, and they're going to change the world in ways that we've really never could even begin to imagine at this point. Securities tokens, there will be infinitely many more essentially tokens that exist, and also there will be infinitely more. There will be so much more capital that exists in the security token market cap. There will be hundreds of trillions of dollars of securities tokens in the future at some point. I don't know if that will be the case for utility tokens, and we are really, really excited to see that future play out, where capital markets are much more frictionless and people can invest in things, sell things, and also do other things that we haven't even begun to imagine once the ownership of real world assets and also digital assets becomes tokenized. That future is going to be amazing, and I'm really, really excited to see it play out.
Yeah, the concept of like raising money through a security token to build a building, and having people from all over the world participate and then own a piece of that building is like really kind of like a cool concept to me.
We're really excited. I'll also tell people to go create your own security token. Go do it. You can do it right now. It'll be on the Ethereum testnet. You can get your friends to buy your security once they've been whitelisted. Obviously, of course, they have to be whitelisted and approved to participate in your offering. But you can go do it right now. So Polymath.network, go create your own security token. It is actually a lot of fun, and you can see what the future of raising capital will be like.
All right. And
if your game is building applications and taking applications to market, and you want to build an app to run in conjunction with the Polymath network, then that's why we're both here today, right? So that integration between the two companies is a pretty interesting one for people that are wanting to take a product to market.
All right. Well, gents, this was really enjoyable for me. I was aware of both projects, but to be honest, I feel like I have a much better understanding of each leaving this, and it was a lot of fun. And
cool.
I hope to talk again soon.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.